For the most updated version of the Glyphs RPG blueprint, tokens, accessories and resources, please visit www.glyphsrpg.com. Also visit 2ddice.com for our internationally popular D20 RPG coins and our other masterful coin works.
This is Chapter 8 of the Glyphs RPG Blueprint, which outlines skills, how they're broken down, and more importantly, how to use them. Okay, so skills, all they essentially are specifically defined talents that are based on a character's special training, their knowledge that they may have, or their specific background. And we're going to apply them towards meeting a specific challenge. So, real quick, aside from knowing the themselves, now one very important thing that we need to consider as far as the glyphs is concerned are the task difficulties, which all they really are default difficulties that the architect can assign to a specific challenge that need to be overcome, okay, in order for the skill to work. Now what that means, that translates to, is a specific number of token slides in a respective shape, as I'm going to show you shortly with the action grid. So by default we have 6 plus 1, I guess you could say 0 over here, which is assumed, different levels of difficulty that we can use. So 0 would be an assumed level of difficulty, which would require no token slide to use, and you just presume automatically that the character can execute the skill. So that can be done to save time, or if it's just not worth making a slide over, okay? But mostly you're going to be using 1 through 6, which are the simple through monumental task difficulty ranks. Now, simple is used more for a very basic menial task, or for a new player that is just learning the system. The most common one that you're going to use for the average challenge is the moderate difficulty. That's why it's highlighted in red. So the average challenge that would require, a moderate difficulty is right here. Basically, it pertains to tasks, and pertaining an average difficulty or whatever. So just wanted to show you that real quick, and then it gets more complex from here, from worthy. You've got complex here, daunting, and finally monumental. So the scale goes up depending on what the architect wants to do with a particular challenge. So as an example, a very basic, simple lock that the rogue needs to pick, you could assign a difficulty of 1 to pick it, I guess. And the most complicated, robust lock there is available might have a difficulty of daunting or monumental in order to succeed. So I'll show you in a moment what that translates to exactly. Next, we have skill levels, which basically means the level of success and development that your character has in a specific skill. Okay, that's the second piece that's driving to what is going to make these skills work in a challenge. So first we have 0, means you're unskilled, you're untrained, you have no idea what you're doing, and you're literally making it up as you go along, or you're trying to copy somebody else, or you're leaving it up to luck to try to overcome a specific skill challenge. So random person just randomly trying to pick a lock with no training is essentially what that means. So that's a 0, which is an unskilled or untrained difficulty, I guess you could say. Okay, but then we get into 1 through 5, which is when the character is actually ranked in a specific skill. They're trained, they have a little bit of experience, and it incrementally goes up. So 1 is your novice, your bare bones beginner difficulty, or your skill set level, I guess you could say, all the way through master. So just read through these and read through the difficulties, get familiar with what they mean and how to apply them in different contexts. Okay, so that's pretty much straightforward here. We're going to be marrying these two together, the challenge, the task difficulties, and the skill levels here are going to be combined. Here on page 159 you can see what I mean. So in order to use a skill, we're going to be using the action grid. So powers use the token slide from the G point and they go into the circle. okay, or a different shape depending on what the specific power calls for. A technique starts from the G logo here, and it always goes to the circle, the big circle. Now, skills are a little bit different. They originate from the G logo here most of the time, okay, and depending on the character's skill level and the difficulty level set by the architect to make the skill work, the token slide needs to land in any one of the shapes here, and it needs to land consecutive times depending on what we're trying to do here. So take a look at this chart here. Take a look at this real quick here. It outlines the skill set challenge token slides that are required to make the skill work. And here you have the list of skill ranks here. So as an example, okay, back to the rogue example, I like playing rogues a lot, so I tend to refer to that a lot. So let's say my rogue has a level 3 rank in locksmith, the lockpicking skill, I guess you could say. So he's a level 3, and the particular lock, the architect sets to a moderate difficulty or integrity, I guess you could say. So for me to pick that lock, obviously for one I have to have the right tools, okay, the lock picks for this case, and I would need 2 slides in the square. So 1, 2, right into the square, and that's how you would activate that particular skill based on my skill level and my my difficulty level to overcome. So that's essentially all there is to it, to using skills. Now, in just a second, let's talk about how they're broken. I'll give you some examples of the default skills. Glyphs categorizes skills into 2 different groups. The first being the exclusive skills, the exclusives, which are simply exclusive to a very specific archetype or a discipline. Okay, so basically these particular skills, they're learned and developed through routine practice, study, and are usually at the very center of a character's life. Okay, so only characters that are derived from a very specific archetype are eligible to use exclusive skills pertaining to that archetype. Okay, so real quick, let's take a look at some of the defaults that I got here. And now we got the warrior, the outlander, and we got several pages of default skills here. Now the descriptions that are included here, they're very simple descriptions because, again, you're supposed to be, as a GM, you're supposed to be very flexible in how to interpret everything in here based on the context that you're playing. But how the skill works and what it's intended for, the names. Okay, now most of these, if you notice, they're in sort of a dark blue color by name. Okay, basically those are generally some of the most subjective ones that the architect can regulate the difficulty on, so they have a little more leeway on those. Okay, but as we'll see here, as an example, we got the fighter, and then here we go with the butcher. We have spatter and doom. Okay, let's look at doom for a second. You'll notice here that the difficulty is a little bit more defined on what it takes to work. So just pay attention to that. That is intentional, the formatting. Okay, most of these, like I said, but the red here's another one here. Okay, the apothecary skill for the priest. So it describes what it does, what it's intended for, and it gives a recommended way to assign difficulty to it. So anything in red, just pay attention to, okay, for the recommendations, but all said and done, you have pretty much full leeway on what you need to set it at. And ultimately it's about giving the players an optimal experience, but you do want to set a decent level of risk versus reward. So you definitely want there to be a little bit of challenge there, as long as the gameplay is moving pretty smoothly is what you're looking for. So more defaults here, okay, with all the archetypes. But real quick, on page 168, you have the commoner archetype. Now the commoner is unique because they do not have, that archetype doesn't have a set of exclusive skills because it's just an average person, okay? But they do have the ability to learn any exclusive skill if they apprentice, train under another character or an NPC, who knows the sought after skill at a level 4 level. So basically, if the person they're learning from is a professional level or a level 4 in that skill, then the commoner, somebody playing the commoner, can learn that skill. So there's a lot of flexibility with that archetype once we're exposed to the right person. The second type of skill that we're going to look at real quick are the lifestyle skills. Now, basically, those are not restricted to any character archetype, and instead simply add a little depth and personalization to your character. Okay, so unlike exclusive skills, lifestyle skills, basically they can pick up through habit, through trial and error, and they're not necessarily formally passed down onto the character through any training or whatever. So basically they're a result simply from the character's life experiences and how they live their life and what they've done in their travels and so forth. Okay, so a great way to help personalize your character, and also use these to give your character a little bit of a backstory. Okay, that's something that I do see quite a bit with my players. Okay, so just a few examples here how we break them down. Okay, now these are not broken down by archetype, but basically by category, which you can add you can add to or expand on if you want. But these are just some of the defaults that I came up with in. Okay, so again, same thing here. Most of them are going to be in dark blue, but then some of them are highlighted in red. That just gives you an example of the difficulty and what it's based on. Okay, so you have survival, you have technology skills, you have athletics, then you have social skills, you have expression skills, your arts, special linguistic skills, cooking, things of that nature. And then down here, through lifestyle skills, we get into vehicles. Now, vehicles, obviously, you'll see here the different types of vehicles that we recognize in Glyphs. They're broken down, and obviously it tells you what it does. But vehicles are really neat because obviously there is the skill check that you can do to be able to use a vehicle, but a lot of times you have to account for how long the character is using a vehicle, where they're driving, what kind of circumstances are around you. So for instance, you may not necessarily require a skill check for the character to run the vehicle. That's entirely up to you. But let's say you want to create a random encounter, a random situation. You may require a skill set challenge to be overcome to drive a car, let's just say. And if that skill check were to fail, then you could say that the character was speeding, and then an authority figure comes and chases them down or whatever. So just a number of different ways you can apply these besides just simply using the skill, but creating different circumstances from them. Okay?